Hello, welcome back to the channel. I am Megan, the Healing Foods Coach. So glad you decided to take time out of your day and watch this video and also to subscribe to this channel. So today's topic is all about your SI joint and the pain that it can sometimes have, and can it be fixed? Well, first of all, what is your SI joint? So SI is just a short way of saying your sacroiliac joint. Where is it exactly? Some of us have heard of it, some of us have no clue, but we all have one. Or sorry, technically we all have two of them. So what is this? What is the sacroiliac or SI joint? Well, at the bottom of our spines, just below the lumbar region, okay, there is a section of bone that is called the sacrum. And this is actually, technically, is also part of our pelvic bone. And how that works is, at the point of where the sacrum piece of bone is, there are two joints, one on each side, one on the right, one on the left, and they connect the sacrum with our pelvic bone to the what's called the iliac section of the pelvic bone. So if we think of, say, this belt, okay, think of this belt as our pelvic bone. All right, and let's pretend the buckle here is the sacrum. So how that would look, I know this is not accurate in any way, but let's imagine that here in our pelvic area, so at the back of the pelvic bone, you've got the sacrum, and above it, you have your lumbar part of your spine and then the upper spine. And then below that, below the sacrum, you have your coccyx, which is your tailbone area, okay, which is right under your butt, right under what you sit on. So on either side of the sacrum, if we're saying that this here is the sacrum, okay, on either side, you have a joint. And what it does is it connects the sacrum here to both sides, both iliac sections of our pelvic bone. And why does that matter? Well, because if we didn't have that, our spines would not be able to connect with our pelvic bone and our legs. And we need that because that is what allows us to have motion and mobility, whether we're sitting or standing, kneeling, crouching, any kind of movement, walking, swimming, cycling, any of that. We have to have a functioning SI joint. It's what allows energy to go from our upper bodies and transfer down through our pelvic area, out to our hips, and down our legs, that allow us to have motion. And if that hurts because we've injured it or something's happened, it makes movement very, very difficult. Anybody who's ever slipped and fallen, anybody who has ever suffered a sports injury where you maybe land hard on your backside and you feel pain in that bony area around the SI joint, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it is really easy to cause injury to the area of our sacrum or our SI joints. That's very easy to do. Typically, if it's nothing too major, we tend to recover and heal fairly quickly. But if we have had something happen that has caused dysfunction of the joint or constant inflammation, it becomes extremely difficult for that to heal. And in some cases, it may not even be possible to heal fully. Why do I mention that? Because inflammation, even at low levels, plays a part in our bodies. And so, as great as our diets need to be to reduce dietary sources of inflammation, if you are still feeling aches and pains and soreness, in spite of eating a very clean, healthy, appropriate healing diet for humans, in other words, one that is non-inflammatory and one that is full of animal proteins and saturated fats, and of course, that can also include non-starchy vegetables and full-fat dairy, in spite of doing that, if you are still finding you have pain in that lower part of your back, it is highly likely that you are dealing with deep-seated inflammation You may have dysfunction. You may have had an injury that hasn't fully healed. And therefore, as amazing as this anti-inflammatory diet is, and it absolutely is, it may take still a long time for that type of inflammation to go away. Why? Because we use our SI joint daily. And as long as we're using it, it makes it difficult for it to heal. So I wanted to share some things with you because I personally do suffer with SI joint dysfunction and constant inflammation. And I have done my entire life. Okay, I've always had issues with my lower back. Oftentimes many of us will say, oh, if I stand for too long, my back starts to hurt. If I sit on hard furniture, it bothers me, whether we've had injuries or not. But if on top of that, we also have things like I grew up in Canada, so I had many winters where I've slipped and fallen on ice and hard snow, wiping out skiing, falling down skating or playing ice hockey, sledding. On top of that, if we are constantly occupied with repetitive motions, whether it's things like leaning down and emptying the dishwasher, picking up our children when they're little, picking up things off the floor where we bend often from the waist, repetitive movement and motion can contribute to SI joint pain. Inflammation is typically a sign that you've had an injury of some kind. And if you have dysfunction, then not only have you had an injury, but there's something more, could be potentially more serious going on. So for me, for example, I have always had problems with my lower back. I couldn't run. I couldn't take up any sort of high impact or contact sport, whether that was things like basketball, volleyball, soccer, gymnastics, anything that involved the pounding of shoes on pavement or a hard surface caused me pain in my SI joint. So for example, if you are a runner and you are running on very hard ground, in spite of whether or not you have excellent supportive shoes, that is going to take a toll on your SI joint. So if you're suffering aches and pains, that could very well be why. If you are playing, if you constantly feel soreness because you're on your feet all day, could be a sign that you have joint inflammation or possibly dysfunction. Now, if that's your job, there may not be a whole lot you can do about it other than trying to perhaps walk around a little bit more, sit down if you can. Some of the things that are doctor recommended to ease the symptoms are excellent. And so whether you have dysfunction, constant inflammation, or just a bit of aches and pains because you've maybe done too much, you landed funny when you went up for that jump shot, or you suffered some kind of injury 6 months ago, but you're still feeling the pain. These things will help ease the symptoms. Doesn't mean you'll get rid of that inflammation, but it will help with the symptoms. And that is gentle walking, 20 to 30 minutes. Start slow, okay? Because if you do too much, too intensely, and for too long, you're just going to end up aggravating your SI joint because, of course, you need to use it in order to walk. And if you overdo it, you're just going to make it feel worse. So keep it simple. Now, other things you might want to try are things like water aerobics or swimming, because there's no stress on your joints. It, in fact, is really, really good. It can absolutely help relieve some of the symptoms of the pain. May, in fact, help reduce a bit of the inflammation, although I think that comes more from making sure you're also following a great diet, okay, which is non-inflammatory. So swimming is a good option, or water aerobics can be really, really good for you. Also, cycling. So riding your bike just for fun around your neighborhood, no pressure, no stress, certainly not if you're doing extreme biking where you're going up hills and over crazy mountainous bumpy surfaces. Probably wouldn't want to do that because, again, that is simply going to add aggravation to a site that is already sore and in that case is already inflamed. So if you're going to ride your bike, great. but do it at a nice gentle pace on smooth surfaces, and avoid going off trail, okay? Because that's just going to make any pain, soreness, potential swelling or inflammation that much worse. What about dysfunction? Well, sometimes we can actually have such a terrible injury or trauma to our lower back that our SI joint can no longer function properly, meaning it doesn't signal right one side or the other. Something happens and it doesn't hold everything in place the way it normally would. So, for example, 10 years ago, I suffered a prolapse disc between my L4 and L5 vertebrae, so right towards the end of my lumbar area, lower part of my spine. And that disc bulged out. And as it bulged out to the right, I found that I had immediate sharp pain in my SI joint. And I could not stand up straight fully. And the other thing I noticed was that my left hip was now higher than my right. So my SI joint dysfunction is this: my hips are no longer quite equally balanced because the one injury caused a dysfunction in my SI joint. So now, even when I'm standing straight, and it's not as noticeable, it was my left hip bone was an inch higher than my right one when the injury first happened. Over the years, it hasn't been as stark of a difference. There's maybe a quarter of an inch difference between the two. So I have to manipulate my body in a way that is awkward in order for my hips to be level. So that is a sign of SI joint dysfunction, where in my case, and in cases of other people as well, your pelvic bone tilts. And in my case, that it was the left side that tilted up. And it never fully came back to where it was before, because now the SI joint is not functioning correctly. It's constantly inflamed and it is constantly sore. Low grade, mind you. How did I figure out what this was? Well, to be honest, about 3 years ago, I was seen for an annual checkup by my rheumatologist, and he confirmed that I definitely had an inflamed SI joint, and that it was also not functioning properly. I was dealing with SI joint dysfunction and inflammation. And there were certain gentle stretches that could help ease the pain, but that it may never fully go away, because again, it's a small area of our body, but it's critical for the functioning and movement of our body. And so there's stress put on it every day. And if you are overweight or obese, if you are dealing with inflammation, arthritis, and those types of conditions, you're then putting additional stress on that very small area that essentially supports the rest of the body. And so that can make things a whole lot worse. And I, for a very long time, thought that the pain I felt down in that area was just my fibromyalgia pain. It took me a while to realize that that in fact was not the case, because I lost the 100 pounds. I got rid of the brain fog. My arms and legs were no longer achy and tingling and painful from the fibromyalgia. And yet I still had this low-level, low-grade pain in my lower back around my SI joints, and I could not figure out what it was. And that's when I was told, no, actually, you have SI joint dysfunction and inflammation. So let me just say this first. Just because you have pain around your SI joint and your sacrum, that does not mean that there's dysfunction. You could very much be dealing with pain because of injury, pain because you're carrying excess weight, because you're inflamed. Perhaps you sat on something hard, you bumped it somehow. It doesn't necessarily mean that the joint is not functioning properly, but there is something going on. So things you can do that can help ease the symptoms are things like, when you sleep at night, try to sleep flat on your back. If, by the way, If you lay down flat on your back and that seems to relieve some of the pain, that's a good sign that you have SI joint issues of some kind. Okay. If you are stiff in the morning, particularly in that area, but then if you move around or you walk a little, that pain sort of eases a bit, that is a sign that you have SI joint issues. Okay, that the pain is the joint. In that case, it's likely your SI joint, not say your other nerves that are in that area. Okay. If you have been on a healthy and healing and non-inflammatory diet, but you're still having pain, then like me, you could possibly be dealing with long-term inflammation because perhaps your SI joint has dysfunction. It's not working or holding up the parts of the body it's supposed to in the way it's supposed to. And there isn't necessarily a way to completely fix that, but continuing on a non-inflammatory diet, making sure that you are not doing high impact or contact activities will help. Keeping your weight down to a healthy range will help. Getting the processed inflammatory junk out of your diet will make a big difference. Even if you still have low levels of pain, you will feel much improvement if you do those things. Now, as I said, things like water aerobics or swimming or gentle walking, even biking, just having a casual bike ride, can all be things that help relieve some of that pain. Be sure you don't overdo it because then you're overstressing the joints. It's kind of a fine line, but I wanted to share that because some things are things that we will have that are chronic. And although eating this healthy, healing, animal-based style diet is absolutely, I think, the best thing to do for the best possible health outcome for each of us, that doesn't mean we won't potentially still struggle with chronic pain to some degree. We may still struggle with, of course, we may still get broken bones. We may still struggle with strokes or heart attacks or cancer that come because of other reasons. So absolutely keep eating a healing, nutritious diet. Please don't stop eating. If you're like, oh, my back always hurts in that area, well, what's the point? Keep eating, because if you add additional dietary inflammation to your body, you will make it 1,000 times worse. And I say that from experience because it's happened with me. As it turns out, I found out 10 years ago that actually, unlike almost everybody else on the planet who has 5 lumbar vertebrae, I actually was born with 6. And what I was told by the orthopedic consultant at the time is that what that likely means is, 1, I have just that little tiny bit more flexibility in my spine, okay, which could be enough to put me at higher risk of having SI joint injuries or dysfunction, and in other words, and also inflammation, which has happened. But also, he felt confident that I'd had at least 2 or 3 other disc bulges in my life, but that they were minor enough, I just hadn't noticed them. And so the reason I state that is there are some things just based on how we are created, how we're made, what we're born with, that we may not ever reverse, we may not ever change, we may not ever fix. And that's cool. And that's okay. And I want to put that out there. However, I would again emphasize that by following this way of eating as I have for the past 4 years, my prognosis would be so much worse because, again, I was carrying 100 extra pounds on my body. I was inflamed from the crappy food I was eating, causing my fibromyalgia to be even worse, causing my thyroid to be underperforming, and a whole bunch of other issues. And that just added on to the stress and the pain on my SI joint and in my lower back in general. And so I want to put that out there to say that, look, there may be some things that are very difficult to fully heal from, but I am convinced that eating this way can absolutely improve them. If we eat a proper anti-inflammatory, nutritious diet, be that higher fat carnivore, carnivore, keto, ketovore, low carb, or something in between on the spectrum. And that can include non-starchy vegetables for those who enjoy them and tolerate them, or full-fat dairy. For those of you who have no dairy issues or intolerances, have at it, okay? Please. Just to say that some things can take years to improve and may not fully improve altogether. But I think our health overall can be that much better that even if we do have some SI joint dysfunction or pain, and we take the steps we need to ease our symptoms, i.e. gentle walking, swimming, some light cycling activities, keeping our weight down, keeping our other sources of inflammation down, we will feel so much better that the pain does become less over time. And in my case, that's true. That constant dull ache is always there, but it is far less now than it was 4 years ago. So there is hope. Who knows? Maybe for some people it does completely heal. I'm not there yet. Maybe in another 4 years' time, I will be able to share with you, hey, my SI joint is no longer suffers dysfunction, is no longer inflamed, and is no longer painful. Wow, that day may come. But for right now, it hasn't. And I'm okay with that because the rest of my health is so much better. I wouldn't trade that for anything. So I really hope that this helps you guys. I hope you find it informative. I know this is a sort of a average layperson's explanation, but I realized as I was going through all the information for myself the other day, how much I appreciated this being broken down. I found certain places for my GP and other sites, other health sites that explained it quite simply, and I appreciated that. And I suspect there may be many people out there who are suffering with SI joint pain, whether it's just inflammation from an old injury or whether there's actual dysfunction, there's still pain. And these are things that could help. Make sure you start with a diet. That'll be a big bonus, but also be gentle with your body. Don't push it. Avoid high impact, high contact activities and sports. And I think you'll find that that absolutely helps improve your pain symptoms. And like I say, hopefully over time, that'll all go away completely. Maybe that will fully heal someday. But until then, these things can help. And for those of you who are suffering with SI joint pain, inflammation, achiness, anything in that area, I hope this is helpful. Gives you something to try or some tools you can put into place that may help ease your pain symptoms, and hopefully they will lessen as well. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all of your support. You guys are fantastic, and I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. If you are interested in getting together one-to-one for some coaching, virtually of course, please check out my website. The details are there. You can go and book a session. I would love to work with you. And until the next time, I will see you, and take care and have a great day. Bye for now, everybody.